Hey guys, it's Lee with Untapped Potential. So we're doing the Grave Pact daily today, and I'm gonna be honest guys, it's been one of those days where getting a video out has been really hard. I had to record this in silence at first. Normally I record my audio as I record my video while I'm building my deck, but due to a thunderstorm in my area that basically would cause every 5 seconds of footage to be punctuated by boom, crack, pow, and all those other noises, I couldn't do that. So I'm having to overdub this part as well, the way I normally do my battles. And this is actually my second time doing this, if I sound a little practiced, because the first time my audio didn't save. Thanks, Adobe. Anyway, so we're trying to sacrifice as many creatures as possible. We need 20 for our daily, and the best colors to do that are black and red. So we're currently sorting through, looking for anything that can do that well, while still also creating a deck that can actually win games. Because even though we do get credit for these sort of dailies, even if we lose, we get even more gold if we win. At the same time, we also have to build a deck that, not only has its effect, but has a good mana curve and a good strategy to it, even if this one happens to have a lot of sacrifices built in on the side. We found a few good things so far, and as we scroll, we're finding even more. We definitely chose the right colors for this, and there's quite a few cards, even in the base cards, that do this job really well. I'm going to be giving you all a full deck list here in a couple moments as we get to that, but I'm running you through my train of thought in the meantime, because not only are we having to build a deck here that has these abilities, we're also having to build a solid mana curve and like I said before, a plan to actually win a game. These guys go in because they generate artifacts, they're just generally good. We're scrolling around here, I'm looking to see what I can see. I realize that if we're going to sacrifice stuff, something like Gravedigger to get it back is probably pretty good. I scroll right past a perfectly good option, but don't worry, we're coming back to it. Like I say, I'm kind of working off memory here. I recorded this before work and then went to work for 8 hours and then came home, and having done nothing but video recording and editing for about the last few nights, I went and watched some Netflix. The Daredevil series is a lot of fun. I encourage you to check it out. I get to the point now where I'm just starting to load the deck up with good cards I think will enhance our strategy, though don't worry, I'm going to notice a few more really good ideas here in just a moment. I do go ahead here and get ahead of myself. I grab our lands, which is normally the last thing I do once we get up to about 37 cards, but since I know what color we're in distinctly by this point, I go ahead and grab it. Normally, when we do these dailies, we are restricted to the whims of the deck wizard, but that's only with archetype quests. For ones that are not archetype-based, like this one that requires us to sacrifice creatures, we are under no such constraint. I finally noticed the really good idea that's been here all along. And now that we're up to about the right number of cards, it's time to load it up with land and get started. I said it's time to load it up with land and get started. I'm actually rounding out my curve here because I am a little low on creatures right now, and at the end of the day, we do actually have to win these games. Having finally reached the magic number of cards, we go over to our basic lands. You'll watch me checking here to make sure I get the right number of each, and we decide to go with a good mix of swamps and mountains, slightly more mountains than swamps, because we need the double red early for some of our aggressive creatures. But ultimately, it's not a difficult split. It's an 8-9. It's not a 10-7 or anything like that. And as far as our deck list goes, we have 4 Bone Splinters, 4 Child of Night, 4 Corpse Hauler, 3 Ember Hauler, 1 Fiery Conclusion, 4 Twin Bolt, 1 Goblin Fodder, 1 Liliana Heretical Healer, 4 Bloodflow Connoisseurs, 2 Gearford Gearcrafters, 2 Gravediggers, 1 Blazing Hellhound, 2 Barrage Ogres, 4 Bloodpyre Elementals, 8 Swamps, 9 Mountains, 2 Dragonskull Summits, and 4 Rakdos Guild Gates. We go ahead and select an avatar. We decide to go with the red wizardy looking fellow, and since we have the red color well represented with him, when it comes time to choose our background, we go grab a spooky looking swamp. And now that we have all that set, we name the deck Sacrifice. And once we've done that, it's time to head to battle. So as we head into game number 1, there's one thing we need to be very much aware of. This deck does not have a lot of draw power, and it can run out of steam very, very quickly, so we need to make sure we get the most out of all of our creatures while sacrificing as many of them as possible. It's going to be a tough balance. We get a good opening hand here with a solid mana curve with both colors, as well as at least one sacrifice outlet, and a way to get them back even better. Our opening draw here is a land, which is good. We would need at least 4 to capitalize on everything in our hand, and our opponent doesn't have a 2-drop. We do. We go ahead and play Child of Night. As far as 2-drops go, you can't do much better than this. The ability to gain a bunch of life early is absolutely spectacular, and there's not enough nice things we can say. We have another good draw here in the form of Ember Hauler, but we go ahead and run out our Bloodflow Connoisseur, as that's the best method in this deck to go ahead and sacrifice creatures to gain +1/+1 counters, and it will be good against big aggressive threats later. And spoiler alert, this deck has them in abundance. Our opponent plays Nissa to grab a land, and then they go ahead and immediately play it, suggesting they don't have any others. We go ahead and run out our Ember Hauler here, and we get sacrifice number 1 in as we sacrifice Ember Hauler to kill Nissa. We are not going to let this get out of control. We swing in to do 3 more damage to our opponent, meaning they're already down a quarter of their life points, and it's only turn 4. We're off to a solid start, and our opponent plays the Centaur that gains him life whenever he plays an enchantment, and naturally follows it up with the best enchantment in the game. However, for him, we've drawn yet another sacrifice outlet that's very powerful. As much as we'd like to have 5 lands to play our elemental, we haven't gotten there, so we go ahead and play Gravedigger to get our card back. We don't actually do anything for the rest of this turn. We pass back to our opponent, who has clearly drawn yet another land, and is running out our favorite card, Rock Maulers. We can't afford to leave this card unanswered, and as much as we have a good answer to it, we're not drawing what we need. Bone Splinters, on the other hand, will let us sacrifice a creature in order to destroy a creature, so Rock Maulers number 1 becomes a non-issue. We run out an Ember Hauler here, and even though we can't do the damage we need to kill it this turn, we offer a trade with our Child of Night. The opponent, however, clearly seeing what we intend, doesn't take it. That puts us up to 26 life to our opponent's 14, which means we're off to a very solid start. Rock Maulers number 2 comes down because they never seem to run solo, and we get a Gear for Gear Crafter here that would let us put a Thopter into play. We run out the other Goblin, however, as we could potentially sacrifice both of them to do 4 damage all at once. We decide to attack with our Child of Night, though, offering a trade, and this time our opponent takes it. Wanting to capitalize on that, we then Twin Bolt it for 1 damage and our opponent for another to get it and that powerful Grasp of the Harrowmancer off the field. Unfortunately, we're still staring down a Rock Mauler, and because these things travel in packs, our opponent plays yet another one. That's 3 for the record. We go ahead and run out Liliana, as this is the best chance we're going to have, and we may want her Planeswalker self to start discarding cards from their hand very soon, as our opponent's creatures are much more powerful than ours are, and the best way to avoid them is to make sure he never plays them at all. He attacks with both the Rock Maulers, and we don't block. We want to be able to do as much damage on the swing back as possible. Both get their renown triggers, making them 6/6s with trample, which can become a very big problem in a very big hurry, especially as we're not getting the lands we need. So what we're going to have to do is rush our opponent and sacrifice our creatures very well to get the most possible value. All our opponent has is 1 Titan of Erebos. But unfortunately, a Titan of Erebos is a 5/5, so we cannot attack. We go ahead and end our turn. Our opponent plays yet another Grasp of the Harrowmancer onto one of his Rock Maulers, making it a 7/7, but for reasons I do not understand, he doesn't attack. I go ahead and sacrifice both the Goblin tokens, 2 more sacrifices to put 2 +1/+1 counters, and finally we get our 5th land. But it's actually not time for the elemental. We play Gear for Gear Crafter to get a Thopter. We want as many creatures as possible that we can now start sacrificing for +1/+1 counters to make sure we have the biggest creature on the field that we can use to defend. But we can't do it this turn. We're going to wait. At our opponent's instep, we go ahead and sacrifice the Thopter and the Gear for Gear Crafter, which also activates Liliana, returning her to our field as a Planeswalker at our opponent's end phase, meaning he doesn't have a chance to attack her. This time we do run out the Elemental, and we tick Liliana up with 2 loyalty, causing both of us to discard a card. We discard our second Bloodflow Connoisseur, because let's face it, the one we have is already doing enough work by herself. And now that it's time for the combat step, I was kidding, it isn't. Our opponent now runs out a bunch of Thopters, meaning he now has flying and powerful creatures on the ground. Here's where the AI does something that I don't quite understand. It sends every single creature after Liliana, even though one would have been more than enough. Nevertheless, that's fine. It means we're not taking any damage, and Liliana has already done her job. Our opponent plays a flying defender here, and the best thing we can do is get it out of the way. So we sacrifice a creature, another plus mark, to get rid of it. We also play Corpse Hauler, so we have yet another offensive threat and a chump blocker if we need it. We go ahead and get rid of him though to get Liliana back, as the opponent clearly overvalues it and we want to get as much value as possible. We sacrifice yet another creature and swing with our Bloodflow Connoisseur for 6, reducing our opponent to 7, meaning if they do another Death or Glory attack, we'll just pump up all our creatures to do as much damage as possible. Our opponent attacks us, putting us down to 6, and that was a lot of damage for one turn, but it isn't enough to finish us off. We sacrifice our Elemental to do a lot of damage to the Titan of Erebos, then finishing it and the other blocker off with a Twin Bolt. We play Liliana here, mostly for kicks, but we do also sacrifice our Ember Hauler, which does activate her one more time. We don't need to, but we activate her +1 ability to make our opponent discard a card, just in case our opponent has a combat trick. Finally, we sacrifice the zombie token she brought to the field for one final sacrifice, and we attack for massive damage, winning game number 1. So we go ahead and jump straight into game 2 after our victory in game 1. The good news is, the deck seems to work even while accomplishing our condition, and also, I can confirm, we are getting credit. We get yet another solid keepable hand here. This one is not as aggressive as our first one, we don't have a Child of Night, but we still have a turn 3 play and our entire hand, 4 sacrifice outlets. Which means we'll be in a good position to advance our daily even if we don't necessarily win the game, though we'd certainly like to. Our opponent's turn 2 plays an Elvish Visionary, letting them draw a card, but it doesn't have a particularly big body attached, so that's okay. We play a 1/1 of our own and draw yet another Bone Splinters, which is not something we want to use on a 1/1, but it's nice to keep our options open. Our opponent plays Evolving Wild, sacrificing it to get the swamp they need to get their second color. We are continuing to flood on lands in the meantime, but we run out our Blazing Hellhound in order to get a powerful offensive threat on the board. We're tapped out, so hopefully our opponent doesn't have anything too terrible up their sleeve. And even though they play Selesnya Guildgate, solidifying their third color, the good news is they really don't. They play their Cullblade, which gets a +1/+1 counter every time one of our creatures dies. And rather than risk screwing the math up, we go ahead and just kill our Child of Night we played this turn to go ahead and kill it. We don't want to risk doing the math wrong when we do damage. We attack our opponent for 4, they elect not to block, and we hit them down to 16 life very quickly. This game can be over very quickly by attacking, but that's not what we're after. We need to fulfill our win condition for our daily. Corpse Hauler shows up, and of course he has his built-in sacrifice ability, which will allow us to get something back from our graveyard. We attack with a Blazing Hellhound again, and this time our opponent elects to sacrifice their creature rather than take the damage. We pass our turn. The opponent has a good number of mana, and they play Erebos' Titan, which we dealt with back in game 1. Unfortunately for him, this time we're ready. He attempts to put an enchantment on it, but we use Fiery Conclusion, sacrificing our Corpse Hauler in order to do the damage before the enchantment would hit, causing the enchantment to miss and opening his board up for our counterattack. Our draw off the top is Child of Night, which is good. We haven't been flooding here, we've been drawing everything we need, and we're able to get in for some quick damage. We have a solid board position against our opponent, who runs out of Rock Maulers because I'm pretty sure that's all the AI knows how to do. Our draw is Dragon Fodder, giving us 2 Goblin tokens. We sacrifice one of them to kill with Bone Splinters to kill the Rock Maulers, and we sacrifice the other one to give a +1/+1 counter to our Bloodflow Connoisseur. We attack our opponent for massive damage, putting them at 3 life. Then, we remember that our Blazing Hellhound, for a single mana, can sacrifice one of our creatures to do a damage to our opponent. Unfortunately, he cannot sacrifice himself, which means we couldn't win that turn. But the card we draw this turn, our Goblin, who can sacrifice himself to deal 2, that will let us finish the job. We use Blazing Hellhound to start sacrificing our creatures one by one to do 1 damage to our opponent. 1 each. That's 2. But finally, we use our Goblin's ability to get in for our 3rd sacrifice. And as we revel in our victory, we celebrate the fact that we finished our... We didn't finish! Damn it! Yeah, guys, we came up one short, which unfortunately for us means we've got to go to game number 3. Nevertheless, hopefully we can finish that one quickly as well. I sure hope so. I was hoping to do this in 2 games, keep this video short for you guys. Our first hand is aggressive, but it doesn't have any sacrifice outlets, and ultimately, that's what we're after here. So we mulligan, and this one comes through big time. There's no fewer than 4 in our opening hand. Our opponent also gets off to a slow start, which we're going to punish. We run out our goblin with his double red cost. We play him first since he has the greater toughness and greater utility with his ability to sacrifice himself, and after that, it's off to the races. The Child of Night we draw comes in next because the extra life gain is, I won't say it's never a bad thing, but it's seldom a bad thing, and we're just going to continue to attack our opponent. Once again, the opponent's on green, the opponent's on black, and the opponent's on white. Didn't I mention the other day how the opponent never seems to play red? I stand by this. We play Corpse Hauler and go ahead and attack with everybody. All we have to do is sacrifice 1 creature this game, and our daily will be complete. So we're not in the business of any funny stuff. We just want to finish this. Hey, did I mention how sick I am of Rock Smaller? Well, if you missed it, I'm sick of Rock Smaller. Nevertheless, Bone Splinters deals with it just as well as it did in rounds 1 and 2. We play yet another Corpse Hauler and attack. There's not a lot stopping our beatdown strategy at this point, as we have yet another Bone Splinter in hand and a Twin Bolt, but our opponent bricks here and doesn't seem to have anything. They have 1 tapped land, so they can't activate their Foundry to get it back this turn, but they do have Unholy Hunger, which they use to destroy our Child of Night. Fine. I guess they don't want us gaining any more life. Well, joke's on him, I'm doing it anyway. I return it to my hand by sacrificing Corpse Hauler, fulfilling the conditions of our daily, and I replay the Child of Night. Our opponent actually runs out of Cursed Spirit here, which is the worst of the plays they could have made, and then they put an enchantment on it to boot, not knowing that we're about to sacrifice one of our creatures to get rid of it. So we go ahead and sacrifice Child of Night to destroy it. We do 2 damage to our opponent with our Twin Bolt, we attack for 2 damage with our Ember Hauler on the ground, and in our second main phase, we sacrifice him to do 2 damage to our opponent. Game number 3, guys. It's done. And that concludes our daily. It's just as well that it took 3 games, as that gives us the gold we need to buy a pack. Our first card is Reeve's Soul, great removal. Dragon Fodder, which we use to excellent effect in this set, is card number 2. Alchemist Vial is very solid in an artifact deck, allowing us to get through big hits when we need it, and it draws us a card to replace itself. Consul's Foundry is amazing, and you'll forgive my mistake, it makes Thopters. You can guess the sort of deck that wants it. Yeah, red and blue, does good stuff. Our next card, Anchor to the Aether, that's the stuff, and it lets you put target creature on top of its owner's library, and then you scry 1. Great in control, it's a huge tempo play against your opponent, and it helps you stabilize your next draw. Finally, we get to our rare, which is the Vryn Wingmare. This one's better also in a control setup. A 2/1 flyer for 3 isn't the worst thing in the world, but it does have the ability that non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. Yes, that includes you, but it's a great way to kneecap an opponent who had a plan that will no longer work. Alright guys, this has been Lee with Untapped Potential. Like, comment, subscribe, and thanks for watching.